Okay, is that working? Hello? Okay, hey guys, hope everyone's well. This weekend I'm off to Spain. I've taken a group of a dozen or so on the ferry to Santander, and then we're doing Picos, Pyrenees, Alps. I'm calling it the pilgrimage because we'll be on tour for 12, 13 days, hotel accommodation, and we're going to do all the high peaks, obviously the three mountain ranges of Europe, about 2,000 miles in total. Hotels rather than camping, got a few pillions on this one, so quite a big trip. We're going to take a long arc round and then come out of Caen back into Portsmouth. So we're not going in and out of Spain, we're going into Spain, across Picos, Pyrenees to Andorra, then up into the Alps and then back across. So quite a big trip. The guys I've got coming on a bit of everything. We've got GSs, Africa Twin, Bonneville, Himalayan, you know, everything in between, KTM 790 and an 890. So a bit of everything. And for me guiding it, I'm kind of racking my brain, what bike do I take, which is the best bike for this trip? And so I just wanted to do a video based around, I guess, the bikes that I've got access to, and just to try and go through what are the pros and cons of any bikes in this class. I guess my background is the smaller bikes. I like the smaller bike category. I have had GS 1200s, I've had V85 TT, so I've had bigger bikes and I do like them, but I think as I've mellowed in life, I'm kind of realising that I just really like the virtues of a lighter, smaller, cheaper bike. For me, I feel like I can do more with it or get more out of it rather than having a big investment sat there in the garage, which I feel I'm never doing justice to, or feeling that I can't use it because of depreciation or other things. Equally, the weight of the matter. You know, this is a 310 GS, it's about 170 kilos, and it feels light and day different to something like a 850 GS or a 1200 GS. And therefore for me, if I'm going on an adventure where I might be doing some track riding or trail riding or wanted to go off and explore, the virtues of a bike as light and agile as this really enabled me to get the most out of my adventure and go down tracks that I probably wouldn't do so much if I was on a bigger bike. I know when I went across America in 2018, I was on a Himalayan, I had guys on bigger bikes. On an evening, I felt like I was on a manageable bike, so I'd go off and explore the desert tracks and things like that. And I think the guys on the Africa Twins GSs probably just felt, you know what, this bike's a bit too big, so they stayed in the bar. Had a different experience to me, but you know, for me, something that's a bit more manageable, and Himalayan's not light, but it's manageable, meant that I could go off exploring a bit more. And so for a 2,000 mile trip around Europe, do you need a 1200cc, 800cc, 650cc? I don't think you do. You know, the Alps trips that we did back in July, where I was on the Vogue 300 and everyone else was on 390 KTM CRFs. I did have an 890 and a 1200, but I also had lots of Himalayans. It just proved that if you do your trip right or in a way that suits the size of your engine, you've got no issue at all getting down to the Alps or Spain or Turkey or around the world or whatever on any size of bike, certainly these smaller bikes. So I'm going to start with why I'm not going on each of them and work my way through to hopefully what I will go on. Although between now and Sunday when we leave, I'll probably change my mind. So the 310 GS is actually what I was going to go on. It's an underloved adventure bike. I don't think it's got much fanfare for the fact that BMW never really put much effort into selling it, and I think from an engineering point of view they diluted the product to bring it in at a certain price point, hence why you've got cast aluminium rims and quite budget suspension as standard, which for somebody looking for a beginner bike is fine, but for anybody who was looking for something a bit more aggressive or intermediate, it probably just lacked a little bit of something, and therefore it's never really took off in the way maybe it could have done, because it's actually quite a decent bike. It's very pleasant to ride, goes distances quite well, it's frugal, it's comfortable, you know, it's a very relaxing machine. This one I've got a Rally Raid Stage 2 kit to fit. I've got halfway through it, and this is why I probably might not end up taking it. I've got the wheels to fit, the back one, the front one, the rear shock, and the front fork internals. I'm just having an issue with mounting on the disc brake on the front to the new spoked rim. So it's meaning it's stretching me for time a little bit, and I'm probably not going to have time to do the internals. I mean, obviously bolting on a £3.5 grand kit to a £5 grand bike, does it make economic sense? That's all up to you to decide. I guess the Rally Raid kit has made sense on the GS310 when you consider the price of a second-hand GS310 and then buying the kit in bits. So maybe start with the suspension, and then if you've got a bit more money, then the wheels, etc. But Fundamentally, ignore the kit, look at a BMW G310 GS, 34 brake horsepower. Is it capable of doing motorway riding, A road riding, B road riding? Yes. Will it do the kind of tracks that we're going to do out there? We're going to do a bit of dirt road riding, a bit of the ACT in the Picos, the Pyrenees, and do a bit of Stella Alpina. Will this bike do that job? It will. As a UK trail bike, it's let down by the fact it's got quite broad tyres and a 19-inch front wheel. So it's always going to have limitations if you're going to want to do anything a bit more aggressive with it. But as a bike to use to adventure, tarmac biased adventure, great bike. Can't fault it. Well, I can, but I'm being kind. Okay, next bike. What we're going to pick next? Let's go to the easiest one to get out, CCM GP450. Now this is a bike built out of frustration. Well, I feel nothing but frustration in a sense, because what the team at Bolton did in trying to build the ultimate long distance lightweight adventure bike, they got so close to perfection with it. It is almost perfect. People said it should have had a 650 engine. To me, as we were saying, a 450cc bike is perfectly able of taking you around the world or to the Pyrenees or the Picos, because it's light and a frothy engine. It's a bit of a race-derived engine from a BMW G450X. It's a little bit peaky, and I think for those early adopters, some were bitten a bit by the aggressive nature of the bike. But 20-litre tank, 165 kilos, fully fueled. Don't take no notice of CCM's claim weight because it's way out of line. Great quality suspension, 8.5 grand when it launched. You know, this was touted to be the ultimate long distance adventure bike, and bar the fact that there were maybe production issues, maybe attention to detail wasn't quite there with it, means that I don't quite have the faith in it that I need to take a guided trip. And so whilst this as a machine is probably the best bike here, you know, by a margin. It rides well, it goes well on road, it goes well off road. It's a bit low geared, so it's a bit buzzy on the road, but it'll sit at 75, 80 and still give a bit of wind on power. So the GP450 was, for me, it's probably the best adventure bike, or best nearly there adventure bike of the last 10 years, because it is almost greatness. And it's just let down a little bit by quality control, by the fact that they were doing it on a shoestring budget in a unit not much bigger than this. So credit to the team at Bolton, but I shall not be taking this bike to the Picos and Pyrenees. Although if you have one and you have faith in it, I think it would be a perfect bike. And it also really hints at the potential of the Himalayan 450, because that's going to have a little bit more poke than the 410. And so could the 450 Himalayan be the bike to be the one to go to? So we're going to start next, or we're going to go next with the Himalayan. Now this bike has got a bit of a story to it. I picked it up yesterday, and it was given to me by a guy called Tom, who saw the campaign to raise a bit of funds for Richard Rowe, who had the accident out in the Alps a month or so ago. He's back from the Alps. He's in Coventry Hospital waiting to go to Oswestry to the spinal specialist. He unfortunately is still paralysed, so he's still nothing has changed there. But Tom reached out. He said, look, I've got a Himalayan. I'm not doing anything with it. It needs a little bit of work to get it going. Do you want it? And then once you've got it going, sell it and put the money towards Richard. So this is a bike I picked up yesterday. It's a 2019 bike. I'm not sure on the miles, but it's got the 462 kit on it to give it a bit more guts, and a few other bits and panniers he's given me and things like that. So the Himalayan, you know, I've travelled a lot on the Himalayan across America, Bulgaria, Scotland, a lot, Ireland a fair few times. So I know that this bike is an absolutely perfect travel bike for people who aren't in a particular rush. And when I say rush, I think this is a misconception with small engines. People think you can't make progress. You can make progress, you just make a different kind of progress when the bike is a little bit slower or a bit smaller. I find because you're going smaller, you don't get as tired, therefore you can ride longer in the saddle. And time in the saddle is worth more than speed on the road. So in actual fact, a pleasant, relaxing motorcycle which you don't get fatigue on is better for covering distances on a consecutive sequence of days, like a rolling trip, than something that's very fast, because something very fast tires you out very quick. I know there's the iron butters will say, well, no, you need 1,000cc to do 1,000 miles in a day. Maybe so. But for me, for traveling, where you're doing 200 miles a day or 250 miles a day, something as relaxing as the Himalayan is a perfect bike for the trip. Would it go around the Picos, Pyrenees, the Alps? No problem. Yes. Would it do the gravel tracks we're going to do out there? No problems. Absolutely. In a way, it'd be the most relaxing bike out of the lot. Long stroke motor, low revving, really relaxing ride, low centre of gravity, which means that even though it's 205 kilos wet, it's still a manageable bike. So ignore the spec sheet a little bit, because what the Himalayan brought to the market was just accessibility, practical, functional accessibility, which we'd not seen before. No company had come out, and still no company's come out with a bike like this, with a centre stand, with a rear rack, with engine guards, you know, with a 15-litre tank for £4,000. It's still, and I said it at the time, the best travel bike of the last 10 years, and I still think it is. Pound for pound, for what it does, for what it's capable of, I don't think anybody's come close to this, and I think it's iconic, and I think this is why Royal Enfield are going to have a real tough job on their hands replacing it. I know we've all just seen pictures of the 450 Himalayan, and actually it looks like the toughest market to please is going to be the existing owners of this bike, who have got really high expectations. But oddly, they've got high expectations, but actually what they want is something that barely differs to this, maybe just a little bit more power. So they're going to be impossible to please, I think, the people who've got a love affair for this. And the difficulty for Royal Enfield is that, can they drag customers away from Honda and KTM? I don't know if they can. I don't know if I don't know if they've got enough badge kudos there. So they're going to rely on existing Royal Enfield customers who at the minute don't seem that keen on the 450 Himalayan. So it'd be interesting to see how that does. Personally, I think it's going to ride great, looks a bit crap. Not sure what they were doing with the beak and the centre instrument cluster, but hey ho. So I'm not going to be taking this one because it's not running. Simple matter. Simple matter. Okay, what we got next? Let's go for the CRF 300 Rally, shall we? Okay, the 300 Rally, an extension of the 250 Rally, an L that came out in 2012. So a long time on market. We've got to give credit to Honda for continuing a tradition of making an accessible trail bike when everyone else had given up. Suzuki gave up on the DRZ, Kawasaki on the KLX, Yamaha on the W250Rs and the other bikes, the Fs, and on the Teneres. So Honda really carried the small capacity trail bike market on its shoulders entirely on its own. So I think we've got to give credit where credit's due to Honda for doing that. This 300 Rally, for me, it was a step up on the 250. It rode better, it felt more grown up, the engine felt stronger, more mid-range. It just felt a better bike, more premium. Obviously that's mirrored by the increasing cost to £6,500 now. And I think it's getting to the top of where you'd think that's actually it's getting a little bit expensive. And the reason being that I sat on it the other day and I'm thinking, I might take the 300 Rally because you know what, it'll be a good comparison to the Vosges. And I sat on it and I went, I don't know if I can travel all the way. Well, I could if I had to, but I don't know if I could travel all the way around there, 2,000 miles with some great road riding with this soggy suspension. And because I've ridden it on the road, and when we rode it with MCN, it's a good bike, it is, but that suspension really does nobble it, because it's always wanted to drag its back end. It's dragging its back end, so the front's light, so you never feel like you connect with the road. So when you drop into corners, certainly faster sweeping corners, or even tight stuff, hairpin stuff that we'll be doing in the Alps, you've just not got the confidence there because the suspension's not there. And if I'm spending £6,500, I kind of don't want to feel, and the first thing I need to do is spend money on the suspension. People can say, yes, chuck in a new shock and that'll fix it, chuck in new front suspension. I kind of don't really want to go down that avenue. So whilst I think this will do it, actually, and it'll probably do it quite well, I just don't get excited about doing the trip on this bike. And I think whatever bike you do it on, there's got to be some excitement. And unfortunately, sorry Honda, as much as a fan of your bikes I have been over the years, the CRF 300 Rally does not do it for me. Okay, what we got? Okay, 3 left. A choice of 3. Well, let's rule out the next one, KTM 390 Adventure. Not for the fact I don't like it, but for the fact it needs an MOT, it needs tyres, it needs brake pads, it needs chain and sprockets, and it needs a bit of TLC. But the KTM 390 is a bike that I think would appeal to a lot of people who've come from a sports bike background, who have ventured onto adventure bikes and who are now looking for something smaller. Because with 43 horsepower and 170 kilos of weight, it flies. It's a really nice, lively, fast, aggressive, well-suspensioned motorcycle, which you can ride really briskly if you want to. It'll sit at 80, 85 on the motorway. On A roads, it really carves up an A road really nicely. Trails, it's not so good, but it would be fine for the Picos and the Pyrenees types of trails that we're doing. And I've toured on it a little bit before over to Wales and stuff, and I found it really comfortable. So if you're after a road-biased adventure bike, I think this is as good as it gets. It's different to the 310 GS, and in fairness, I think the 310 GS is a better adventure bike because it's got a more natural standing up position, and it's not got that frustrating traction control toggle and things like that that this has got, that this sort of blights the off-road experience with a little bit. But for a trip down to the Picos, Pyrenees and Alps, which we have actually got a guy, Bob, who's riding his 390 Adventure, I think this is a great bike. So for somebody who likes more spirited riding, who wants to make the most of the corners and the cornering and the mountain roads in those mountainous areas of Europe, I think a 390 KTM is a really good bet. I wouldn't go for the spoked wheeled edition that's just come out, simply for the fact you've got tube tyres. And if you get a puncture with tube tyres, kind of game over for a bit unless you're really good at fixing stuff. So I like the KTM 390 Adventure. It's not perfect. It feels like KTM, a bit like BMW went, you know what, we've got a bit of an hole in the market. There's an entry level adventure bike we need to build. What have we got? We've got a Duke chassis. Okay, let's borrow most of that, give it a bit of lipstick, and away we go. The end result is not what we probably anticipated or asked for, but if you stand back and reassess it and go, well, what is it? Well, it's a really good road-biased adventure bike that can do gravel track quite comfortably, then go for it. It's the most exciting bike here. You know, speed-wise, it's quicker than that Motorini, and I know that because I've chased Bob up one of the passes in Ireland, him on the 390 KTM, me on the 650, and I couldn't catch him. And I was bloody screaming that 650, but I think this 390 engine has got such punch on the throttle. Very brisk motorcycle. Which leads me to the two Chinese machines. Anybody think I was sponsored by the Communist Party of China? But I'm not. But the unfortunate reality is, out of the bikes I've just shown you, the two bikes it'll be down to is either the Vogue or the Motorini. The Vogue is honest bike in its origins, is that it declares itself a Chinese bike. The Morini dresses itself with an Italian flag, but actually on the engine casing says made in the People's Republic of China. So it's a Chinese bike, it's a Chinese bike. The 300 Rally has done nothing but impress me, in fairness. You know, I got my eye on it when I saw it coming out. Looks interesting. What? It's going to be £3,799? Fuck, that is cheap. It's going to be crap. Is it going to be crap? Not sure. Let's try it. So they've loaned me one, and I've been down the Alps on it. I've done some trails down there. I've done a Land's End John O'Groats and back trip on it. I've done Cornwall, Devon on it. I've been somewhere else. I've just been green laning on it in the UK, hence why it's so filthy. Still got stock tyres, way over service at 4,600 miles, 700 miles. And I've got to say, it's a very good bike, and it's very good because it's got attitude and it's got aggression, which unfortunately the Honda's not got. The suspension, for one, it's still a little bit soft, but for most riders, including myself, it's firm enough. So therefore you can pitch yourself at a track and attack a track. You can attack a climb. The suspension keeps pretty firm, gives you good poise and gives you good progress. The engine as well is far more responsive. I took the Honda just around the car park outside, and where this wants to go, it's lively, low geared, ready to ride, ready to race, KTM. You know, this will take off, and it feels like it's willing. It feels like a dirt bike. It feels like a little scrambler. Seat height's taller than a CRF. Is it as well made as a Honda? I don't think it's going to last as long as a Honda. It's not as premium. There's a few cheap components on it. But £4,000, 11 litre tank. I would trust this to take me the Picos, Pyrenees and the Alps, no problems. I know it handles well in the corners, in the hairpins, and I know it'll do the gravel track all day long. This, for me, I still think the Himalayan is a better travel bike because it's got more going for it. It's a better rounded bike, centre stand, rear rack. You know, it's better for a long trip, probably a bit more relaxing. It'll sit at 60, 65 with less effort or buzziness than this will. But for a trail travel bike, This has got some of the attitude that makes a CCM so lively, but it feels reliable, it feels dependable and simple to work on. Today I've been checking air filters and things like that. Easy bike to work on, £4,000, no brainer. So that comes down to a conundrum. Actually, let's leave this in picture just for a minute, because this sums up the debate here. Big bike, small bike. And if we take this from Pyrenees 650 as something that represents the large capacity adventure bike, because it's, to be honest, it's 250 kilos, so it may as well be a GS12, it may as well be an F850 or a V-Strom Thou or anything like that. You know, it's in that same weight category, and therefore it's a type of bike that a lot of people these days are traveling on. And I don't like naming YouTuber names, but Richie Vida's video was interesting when he took a group to Picos, to the Picos mountains, and he did a gravel track that we'll be doing on our trip. And all his guys were on GSs and Africa Twins and stuff, and they really struggled. They struggled at this gravel track. It's hard to gauge how difficult it is from a video, but they struggled on that and they had to turn around and come back. The reason being, they didn't have the ability to ride the bikes that they were on the terrain that they wanted to ride them on. Whose fault is that? Well, it's nobody's fault, is it? Because the adventure bike has become a quarter-ton beast. It's what people are expected to ride on an adventure, so it's what people buy. And there's nothing wrong with the manufacturers making them or the customers buying them. But where the problem is where they meet in the middle. And I think there's a lack of synergy on what the customer thinks they can do and what the bike can do in their hands. All these bikes are capable in the right hands, but in the average rider's hands, I think they're a liability. This on a gravel track, even with me, I'm a decent rider, but would I want to be on a gravel track on that over that? Not a chance. So it comes down to how well these small bikes can ride the road sections, because it's the road sections that make up a large part of your adventure. Now for me, I think this, or the 310, or the 390, or the Himalayan, CRF with a bit of suspension work, they all do the road work well enough. For me, they execute the road and the turns crisply enough and with enough speed to keep things interesting, well enough for them to make up for any downside on the trails, because they're far more accessible. So these are your friend on the road when you're wanting to ride fast, maybe ride on the motorway, cover a lot of ground. But they become a problem for you when you want to get off the main road. And that's why I think these smaller bikes, for me, are a better bet. They might not be for you, but I know a lot of riders who are switching to smaller bikes because they realise that, and I'm the same, you know, I'm 43, my hips are sore because I skied into a tree and broke a femur and my pelvis. You know, I'm struggling with these big bikes now. I've got to be honest. I dropped this in Wales on the weekend and I struggled to pick it up. You know, I don't have that problem with this bike. And what is adventure? Well, adventure is accessibility. And to access things, to go places, you have to have confidence. You have to have confidence in your abilities to deal with what you're going to face. And having the wrong bike versus the right bike makes a huge difference. So all I'm saying to you is, don't go out and buy the bike that the marketeers tell you that you ought to buy, because you'll end up with too big a bike. You'll certainly end up with too much luggage. Just consider what you want to do, what you want to get out of your trip, what you want to feel like when you're in that remote area. Do you want to feel confident and invigorated and that you've got a friend on your side, or do you want to feel like you're riding a foe who is going to lay on top of you and pin you to the ground any opportunity you give it? So for me, if it was a choice of these two, which is what it is, I'd go this one. And I'd sit at 65 on the motorway, but then I'd have a blast on the trails. So that's it. What bike for Picos, Pyrenees, Alps? Those 300 Rally. Needed service desperately. We'll worry about a service another time.